Welcome to Podkey Slopcast, where AI, cyber, and infrastructure stories get pressure tested. A fake cyber panic, a real AI security push, quantum deadlines that may outrun the hardware, and a lot of very expensive compute. The common thread is that the loudest story usually isn't the most useful one. Start with the NSA Mythos mess, because it's a good example of how ambiguity turns into a breach narrative almost instantly. What now seems confirmed is that the NSA director's reference to Mythos was about a controlled red team exercise, not an active compromise. That matters because a live breach implies adversary access, operational failure, and immediate strategic damage. A red team exercise implies testing, simulation, and maybe clumsy communication, but it's a very different category of event. A former official added another useful piece of context. NSA red teams had lost access to Mythos after Project Glasswing authority expired. That helps explain why there was urgency to clear up the misunderstanding. The lesson isn't that concerns were irrational. If officials use loaded language without enough context, people will fill in the blanks. But the stronger reading here is misinterpretation, not cover-up. OpenAI releasing the full GPT-55 cyber model is important, less because of benchmark bragging and more because of where they relax the product constraints. This is a model fine-tuned for security tasks with reduced guardrails, and OpenAI says it beats Mythos on the CyberGim benchmark. That's a meaningful claim, but only within the limits of the benchmark. Benchmarks tell you something about capability under defined conditions. They don't automatically tell you how a model behaves in messy enterprise environments or whether defenders can safely operationalize it. The more grounded evidence is from partners reporting hundreds of bugs in open source libraries and 37 patches actually deployed. That gets at a point people still underestimate. Vulnerability discovery is becoming cheaper and more scalable. The expensive part is verification, disclosure, patching, coordination, and making sure fixes don't break production. If that's true, then AI changes the bottleneck. The advantage may not go to whoever finds the most issues first, it may go to whoever can run the remediation pipeline fastest and with the least organizational friction. The Five Eyes bulletin lands in that same frame. The unusual part isn't just the warning, it's the audience and the wording. The US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are publicly telling businesses to treat AI-driven cyber risk as a core business issue, not just a security team problem. That's not bureaucratic fluff. It reflects a real operational issue. Assumptions about attacker cost, speed, and scale can age out in months when frontier models improve quickly. The bulletin also explicitly urges rapid integration of AI tools into security operations. So this isn't a simple cautionary message about AI danger, it's a two-part argument. The threat is rising, and failing to adopt defensive AI may itself become negligent. That creates a hard trade-off for firms. Move too slowly and your defenses stagnate. Move too fast and you may deploy immature systems into sensitive workflows. The bulletin doesn't remove that tension, but it does make the direction of travel pretty clear. The new US quantum executive orders are ambitious on purpose. One pushes agencies to work with industry toward a functional quantum computer by 2028. The other pushes migration to quantum-secure cryptography by 2031. Those are concrete dates attached to a technology with very uncertain hardware timelines, which can look contradictory until you separate the two goals. Building a useful quantum computer is speculative in timing. Preparing cryptography for a world where one eventually exists is much less speculative, because migration itself takes years. The orders also emphasize protecting quantum firms' intellectual property and cooperating internationally to prevent adversaries from acquiring capabilities. So this is industrial policy, national security policy, and procurement policy bundled together. The risk is that calendar-driven targets create performative compliance. The benefit is that agencies finally get forced to stop treating post-quantum migration as somebody else's future problem. SpaceX signing a roughly $6.3 billion compute rental deal with Reflection AI through 2029 tells you how strategic GPU access has become. The claim from analyst Sweeks is that SpaceX has already recouped about half its investment through compute deals, and the broader thesis is that being both a model lab and a neo-cloud GPU supplier creates a compounding advantage. That argument makes sense if compute scarcity persists. If you're supply constrained, owning the infrastructure can shape who gets to experiment fastest, train cheapest, and sign customers others have to turn away. But it's still a bet on sustained demand and on the market valuing integrated supply over more modular alternatives. Now compare that with Google, where John Jumper went to Anthropic and Noam Shazir to OpenAI, and Alphabet dropped 7.2% intraday, wiping out more than $200 billion in market cap. Stock moves that large are never pure referendum on two departures. Markets were also reacting to a narrative that Google may be losing the frontier talent war, and with it, momentum in enterprise-facing agentic systems. The talent story is plausible because frontier AI is still unusually sensitive to key people. But it's also easy to overstate. Big labs are ecosystems, not solo acts. The stronger claim isn't that Google is finished. It's that investors now see talent retention itself as a leading indicator of competitive position. One of the more practical findings this week came from KPMG and the University of Texas, looking at 1.4 million workplace AI interactions. Their highest impact users weren't just better prompt writers in the narrow sense. They treated AI as a reasoning partner. They framed the problem, iterated, challenged outputs, and worked in back-and-forth loops. That matters because it pushes against the lazy version of enterprise AI adoption, where management buys licenses and assumes productivity will materialize automatically. The study says these collaborative habits are teachable at scale. If that's right, then the ROI question shifts from access to training and workflow design. In other words, the bottleneck may be managerial and educational more than technical. Companies don't just need models, they need people who know how to think with them without outsourcing judgment. The data center resource debate is a perfect case where both minimization and panic miss the real picture. On water, critics highlighted Amazon's planned Indiana site using 300 million gallons a year. That sounds huge in isolation, and for a local community, it may be huge. But globally, Amazon says its data centers used 2.5 billion gallons in 2025, down 2% from 2024, despite expanding capacity. And the comparison numbers are striking. Roughly 1 day of US golf course irrigation equals a year of Amazon's use, while California almond production uses orders of magnitude more water than all US data centers combined. Those comparisons don't prove local concerns are overblown. They do show that national rhetoric can distort local planning questions. The relevant issue is often watershed stress, timing, and infrastructure, not raw national totals. The same pattern shows up on electricity. The Institute for Energy Research found no statistically significant correlation between the number of data centers in a state and average electricity prices. Bloomberg, looking at 25,000 grid nodes, found local wholesale spikes up to 276% near major clusters when grid capacity lagged demand. Those findings can both be true. State averages can hide local congestion. So the better takeaway is that data centers don't automatically raise power costs everywhere, but concentrated demand absolutely can create local price pressure if transmission and generation don't keep up. That's where unions and community benefit negotiations matter. They can turn abstract resentment into concrete bargaining over jobs, tax receipts, and local investment. The Richland Parish example is unusually tangible. Meta-linked tax revenue helping fund $50,000 teacher bonuses. That doesn't erase environmental concerns, but it shows these projects aren't defined only by extraction. Outcomes depend a lot on who negotiates and how early. The through line here is simple. Separate the headline from the mechanism. Whether it's cyber risk, compute markets, quantum policy, or data centers, the second-order effects are where the real story lives. Thanks for listening to Podkey Slopcast. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm. Podkey.